as satisfying as it is to like blow up your life, it was, it's challenging to quit something that when you like the people a lot.
Welcome to Artists in Offices, a podcast that explores, through interviews with working artists, the idea that the work you do for pay supports the work you do for love. Or does it? I'm your host, Rebecca Bird Grigsby. Having quit my full-time day job in 2017, I'm currently a recovering artist in offices, rebooting my studio practice while trying to figure out my next career move. Each episode of this podcast explores the perspective of an individual artist juggling their creative practice with their day job. In this bonus episode, I check in with Elizabeth Amento, the first artist I interviewed for season 1 of the podcast, who has since left her day job in San Francisco and moved to New York City. This bonus episode was recorded in late June 2019, a week before she started her new job and about 3 months after she made the move. So we'll talk about I'm very eager to hear what you'll be doing. But before we get to your new day job, I wanted just to talk a little bit about, if you could, when we talked in the fall, I think you were about a year into your job at the time, working in accounting in San Francisco. And at least I didn't get any impression that you were looking to make a drastic change at the time. So I'm just curious if you can take us back to that time or whenever you kind of made the decision, like what led you to make, a pretty dramatic change in terms of quitting your job and moving from San Francisco to New York City.
I did listen back to my original episode, and I did mention something about like using my, skills that I've gained and like kind of combining them with my passion for art.
Yeah, no, I remember that too, but I didn't get the impression that you had a specific plan yet. So
it was kind of actually happening right around then. Yeah, so I had a rent-controlled apartment in San Francisco. So that kept me there longer than I anticipated.
So affordable that you kind of can't afford to leave.
Yeah, San Francisco had changed so much during the time that I was there. I had kind of intended, to move to New York after grad school, but then things happened and, life got in the way. I kind of recently actually was like looking back through some exchanges with people, and I think I'd been, kind of thinking about how to get back here for a while, but just the apartment that ended. And
so the lease ended, and that was sort of your opportunity to make your move.
It's, controversial to discuss. So we talked in like November, right? And it happened like around Thanksgiving, that just a couple weeks later that I received another offer. But it had been like 2 years prior that I received an initial offer, and then he kind of like let it go. And then this time it was just like he was threatening the Ellis Act. And so it just was time.
So your original plan was to move to New York City after grad school. You ended up in San Francisco and stayed for a bit. So yeah, talk about, it's sort of obvious for artists, like why, why to move to New York City is not a mystery, but I'm just curious to hear in your words, why did you want to make that huge move?
I have friends here from grad school, and, that was a really influential and important time in my life. So to make the change to be close to those people and be around people that prioritize art making and art seeing, and being around people that are in the art field.
I was sort of explaining in the question that part of my interest in creating this podcast in the first place is just to sort of, create a little bit of transparency around some of these, like, I think what people think are kind of mundane details, but I'm always like, but how'd you get the show? And how did you do this? And how did you make money while you were doing that? And so, so in the spirit of transparency, can you talk a little bit more about kind of planning the move and, what was that process like for you, and how did having friends and family on the East Coast kind of help in that process? And, how did you find a place to live, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I think, the situation with the apartment afforded me the opportunity to have a cushion to be able to move. Yeah, I got a room in an apartment through friends of a friend, and they are art adjacent. And it was really nice that they were cool to interview me over the phone and provide me the opportunity to rent their room for 2 months. So it was nice that I had a place to land, and they were very supportive, and it was a very nice home environment. And then I just kind of like in the last week got the job, and like, so I decided to get another sublet for July, but I'm excited to maybe in August get an apartment. I really like a little studio of my own, something that I can not have roommates, and also like, kind of like a studio plus where, they're all different. So like you can have some space to make work.
Well, so tell me about your new job. Congratulations, obviously. So yeah, I mean, what was your, what will you be doing, and kind of what was the backtracking from there? What was the search process like for you?
I jumped into looking at jobs that were more art adjacent. I don't know how to say this in a nice way, but it turns out the arts don't really pay very well.
Yeah, no, I don't think that will come as a surprise to anybody listening.
That was kind of a navigation there because it was something that I wanted to be closer to. But I kind of had to revisit my skill set and my resume and where I was looking. So the job is project manager at a startup that makes interactive retail display units.
Designating studio space within or outside your home can be tricky no matter what, but especially during such a dramatic transition. I was curious to hear from Elizabeth how she's handled the continuation of her creative work, given the temporary nature of her housing so far, and the fact that she's essentially starting from scratch in terms of art supplies and access to tools. So I was going to ask about your studio space or setup, but I would imagine that's kind of in flux right now with the kind of sublet and then kind of cat sitting situation.
Yeah.
But then I did share the image of, I liked that image that you shared of the shelves with kind of like reaccumulating the basics. So yeah, talk about how you've handled making work. I mean, I would imagine to some extent it probably took a back burner for much of the transition, but how have you been able to maybe keep your kind of work going, and especially in such a kind of temporary and fluctuating situation?
I mean, it was challenging, right? Because it's like I had time, so wish it didn't have to be on the back burner, but kind of needed the job for like, money. Yeah, it was kind of weird I haven't gone to an art store to buy art supplies in a while. So reaccumulating that kind of stuff. And then I knew that, I just kind of like had to hit the ground running in terms of like my projects. So jumped in and got a class at that wood shop, Makeville Studio, took that class and then used it a little bit more. And I think I might actually go back at kind of like the chunkiness of some of those shapes and might want to incorporate them. I really wanted to see like how the more refined shapes use this like sourcing ability that I have. So I was able to just, go online and have a drawing and see who could help me convert it and find the right place. I think it's actually a place in Emeryville that a friend suggested via Instagram. So, it's kind of nice when you put stuff out there and people are like, oh, here's an easy solution.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool that you kind of, like you said, hit the ground running and took that workshop, which I think you were saying you had to take like a certain class just to have access to that equipment. Yeah. And then is it the kind of situation where do you have to take a class to access it, or can you are there open studio hours? How does that work?
You have to take the class to be certified unless you contact them. And then I was able to book time. But, I was just really kind of thinking like practically, do I want to be standing at the saw for hours on end? So like I said, I might utilize it in some way, but I think really getting him, I don't know if you've seen the video of like me pulling off the sticker from the CNC stuff. It's really exciting. It's like I drew it and then they're here and then I like get to work. So I'm like painting everything white now, and then I'm going to paint, and then just planning on making like 5 pieces and like learning from that as I go. And then it can be more.
Yeah, I actually think that's really smart. I mean, I love the idea of like learning how to do it yourself and having access to that. But if the important part is not finished, but like the piece, so that you can incorporate it into the rest of the work, I think it's smart when you have limited time to outsource some parts of your process.
How is this going to work when I do have a job?
Right. When you might not you're not going to have time during the week, or, you're not going to have as much time. Well, and I wanted to ask, actually, I don't think I put it in the questions that I sent to you, but I kind of posed the question on Twitter of, and I think I wrote it on Instagram too, of how we talked about this, and it came up a lot over the course of the podcast about how, there are at different stages of the project, you need different kinds of time. Like, you know, when you're working on production, like let's say you got to crank out 12 paintings for a show, you've already gone through the creative brainstorming. You can just, okay, I've got 15 minutes, I can do this. I've got an hour, I can do this. But at the beginning of a project, when you need like, it would really be awesome if I had like 3 or 4 hours to like think about this and do research and I feel like when you're looking for a job, it's like when you're in between things, and I've talked about this with a couple people as well, it's like such a kind of catch-22 because it's like that's when you have the time potentially to do that. But you're not only spending time looking for a job, which takes so much time, but you're also like your brain is occupied with that. So I'm wondering if you were able to, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but if you were able to carve out any bigger chunks of time while also like kind of almost compartmentalizing, like looking for a job, like, okay, I've applied to a job today. I'm going to go spend a couple hours on my creative work.
Sure. I think it was actually more, I was having a little frustration because it's like I wanted the tangible objects, and I was waiting to take the class, waiting to figure out who could help me like convert the files and how much I was going to pay. And like for that, which is like, it's weird when you think about like time, how much your time is worth versus like paying out of pocket. So like just sort of the waiting to get it done was actually challenging.
So when we talked in the fall, and I can only imagine kind of how the past, however long that's been, 6-7 months, has affected this, but you kind of mentioned, you know, your creative work was in a bit of a transition. And again, this goes back to like, to me, it kind of sounded like you needed some of those like bigger chunks of creative brainstorming time. So, you know, maybe talk about how your work has been affected by the move, and where do you feel like your project is now?
I'm in production, but I'm not sure. It's like I was so set on getting these shapes made that now that I have them, I'm like, what do I do now?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's interesting too. So it kind of ebbs and flows. It's like you need that creative brainstorming, and then you produce, and then you kind of have to go back to the drawing board and figure out the next stage, and then you can get back to production.
I have them all now, and they, and so I'm not, like I did a little, you know, that one of those pictures we posted was of sort of some composition ideas. And then I'm like, this is okay. So I'm not sure if it's just because it's what I really wanted, like even with the, you know, thinking that the bandsaw would be the solution. It's like, I have to keep like revisiting, you know, it's not always perfect. It's not always like, oh, this is going to do it. And then you're like, oh, well, that was a failure.
So it sounds like you just need some more time to kind of play, like with the materials that you have now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I wish I could have done a lot more things in the past, like 2.5 months almost. But like the stress of job hunting kind of. And the time, I mean, it just takes so much time. You know, to like revise your resume for and it sounds like you also had, like you mentioned, you were kind of looking at art adjacent jobs and then had to kind of like rethink that strategy based on how poorly those jobs pay. So that takes time. Creative community is something I discuss with each of the artists I speak to for this podcast. Elizabeth has been in the unique position of moving to a new place, but with a sort of built-in creative community of friends from her past before she moved from Boston to San Francisco. I think you kind of have almost, it sounds like, a little bit of a built-in community. Again, another benefit of moving somewhere that is great for art and also where you know people. But I'm curious if you could talk a little bit, have you been able to tap into that creative community there? We talked about this, you know, when you were in San Francisco and how that changed from when you first moved here to, you know, just kind of over time. And kind of what has that looked like for you so far in New York? It's been great. My existing friends and new friends go to see art and make art and care about making art. So that's been really nice. It's just kind of the norm.
So, I mean, obviously you're still kind of in the thick of this transition and you haven't, you know, you've yet to start this new job. Yeah. But I'm just curious if you have any, you know, if you're sort of thinking ahead, if you have any sort of longer term goals, or you have, you know, kind of like before you've started the job, do you have kind of goals around like when you're going to, you know, carve out your studio time, or are you just going to kind of like let it flow and be more organic about it?
I'm really excited for this job, and I want to put like, you know, 120% into it. So there might be, you know, time constraints but I've had that before. So, part of dealing with that is my thinking of having my own space where I can work at home. So there's always, like time after work to work on something a little bit, or time on the weekends. My plan right now is to like make some things that I'm happy about, and maybe, like apply to some things. But, my art's for me. So I can be stressed about it at times, but it's also like an ongoing life work. It's my life's work.
Yeah. And I think that's come up a lot in the podcast too, of it takes a long time, I think, after an experience like grad school, where we're producing so much work so quickly, to like just give ourselves permission to allow the work to kind of ebb and flow with life, with the sort of faith and confidence that you're going to come back to it.
I mean, it's funny, right? Like I was so busy with the move and everything, and I was thinking about these projects and like, bummed I couldn't be like working on them actively, and then like, time constraints on job hunting. But I found some time to, sketch or something. And you have those moments where you're like, oh, I can do this.
I still got it. Yeah, definitely. Well, plus, I mean, again, you're in New York, like, not that there's other, like everyone there is an artist, but it's not like you moved to some sleepy town where maybe the cost of living is less, but now, you have no community. So if, you know what I mean? Like, I think that will also, it would seem to me that will also kind of like help you kind of stay active, and because you're just with so many like-minded people and seeing so much other work, that I feel like that also just is like a daily reminder of what you really want to be doing when you get done with your job.
Yeah. And hanging with people that are like, no, sorry, I can't hang out, I have to work in the studio. You're like, yes.
Yeah, you're like, I get it, I understand, I respect that. Okay, some final thoughts on the emotional roller coaster that is life as a working artist, all of which has been amplified for Elizabeth by this huge change she's made. Does handling rejection ever get easier? Does your creative community lift you up and help you sustain this life choice? Do you have a plan B?
The high and low of applying to jobs is like insane. So like, yay, today, and you go on an interview and then you don't hear back, or
God, I know.
And then you just like, you're constantly like, thinking about who you are and what you want out of your life. So
yeah, and I would imagine too, it's hard not to kind of doubt. I'm not saying that you did or that you should have, but I've been in that situation a few times where I'm like, what was I thinking? Like,
definitely had some plan Bs. I was like, okay, I'm just going to buy a truck and a dog and we're going to Montana.
There you go. Yeah, no, it's funny too, because I remember when we moved from here to Boston, and I just remember like, and we had 2 cats. We didn't have kids at the time, but like getting in our apartment and it was like filthy just from like nobody being in it for a few weeks. And I just remember like, and the time change. So, with the time change, it was really late there already, and it was hot and humid. And I remember just like being on the floor of our kitchen, and I think my husband had gone out to get like Pizza Hut or something from like the Target. Like we didn't know where to go to get food, and just being like, and literally crying and being like, what did we do? Like, and then, a couple weeks later, it's fine. So I think that that's normal, and you just have to weather those lows. And also, I mean, I think it's funny. I was just talking to my husband about this, because I'm starting to apply to jobs, and I'm just so like, you'd think the more, we deal with so much rejection as artists, you'd think it would get easier, and it just doesn't. It's like, I just want to feel relevant and needed. And like, but I was telling him how the older I get, you do lose that, you become more cautious. Like in my 20s, I would, for better or worse, just like jump before looking. And I'd have that moment of like, Christ, what have I done? And then I'd figure it out. And usually it was a good thing. But as I get old, but then as I've gotten older and accumulated more of those experiences, I've definitely had a few where like the Christ, what have I done moment never changes. And then I have to have like an exit strategy. So I'm like so apprehensive about like, I'm super cautious, which is like not always a good way to be. So, I just think kudos to you for like making the move and having, faith and confidence in yourself that you're gonna land on your feet, which you have. So, well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking out the time to follow up.
It has made me, feel like in this time of transition, it's been nice to know that you care. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I care. And like I said, I think, I've heard from a few people that I think people who listen to your initial episode will want to hear how you've been doing. So I think people care. Community's great. And I, of course, can't wait to see, to continue to follow you and see what else you do. So I wish you all the best. You can find more information about Elizabeth at artistsandoffices.com. To listen to our original interview, look for episode 1 wherever you listen to the podcast. Artists and Offices is produced and edited by me, Rebecca Bird Grigsby. Music is provided by Mr. Neat Beats. Show notes and additional episodes can be found at artistsandoffices.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing wherever you get your podcasts and leave the show a rating or review. Thank you so much for listening.
Get a room in there. I'm not talking well. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You've been busy.